Hello, one last time, amazing teachers. Welcome to Module 6 and our final module for this course. We have talked so much about all the different aspects of learning centers, and so now it's time to put it all together. We're going to take everything that we've learned about the types of centers, choosing your center activities, introducing your centers, managing your centers. We're going to put it all together so that you have the ability to have a clear plan for implementing and using learning centers in your classroom going into next year. So I have some questions that you need to consider whenever you're planning out centers for next year. Some of them we've already talked about and we're just kind of revisiting that. Some of them are new. It's just details that we have to add in now that we have that basic foundation of knowledge when it comes to centers. So the first thing that you need to consider is what type of centers you will use. So if you think back to when we talked about that, are you going to use exploration centers or skill centers or both? You need to make that decision about what kind of centers you might use. Next, you need to consider what management system you'll use. So are you going to use teacher-directed, student-directed, or somewhere in the middle? If you're going to be somewhere in the middle, do you want to use population control? Do you want to use must-do centers? Do you want to use an alternating system of rotations and choice? You've got to decide what kind of management system you want to use. Then we need to start getting down into the weeds of this, right? So how many centers will you have? And what will those centers be? An average number is about 8 to 10. You want to make sure that you have enough for all of your students to be working in a center at the same time, but you don't want to have so many that it's overwhelming, right? So 8 to 10 I have found to be a really good number. If you have 2 to 3 students in each center, then that covers it, and it doesn't leave a lot of gap. It doesn't leave a lot of open spots where nobody's working. And then after you've decided what centers you're going to have, how many you're going to have, next we need to think about where is each center going to be located. And again, this goes back to your unique situation with your classroom at your campus. Do you have a set area in your room for each one of your centers, or do they have to be portable? So they have to be put away for church and then you pull them back out during the week. Either way, you have to know where your students are going to work on those centers. So even if they are portable, maybe you still have an area of your room that's designated as the art center, and that's where you put the art materials when you pull them out from your closet or from behind your curtain. And then you also need to think about things like keeping the quiet centers together away from the noisy centers, right? You don't want to have kids building with blocks and knocking towers down right next to the listening center where they're trying to hear a story on headphones. So you have to think about that whenever you're deciding where to put your centers as well. You want to think about access to the materials. Where are you going to put the materials? How are you storing them within that area that you have set aside for that center? And then think about the amount of space that your students are going to need for that center. So, the listening center, you don't need a lot of space to store the materials. You don't need a lot of space for the students. You could have a cozy little corner with an iPad or a Chromebook and some headphones, CD player, tape player if you want to go old school, and then the book that they're going to read. So you need like one little bucket and maybe a couple pillows and you've got a listening center. The block center, on the other hand, takes a lot more space. You need shelves that hold the different kinds of blocks. You need space for them to be able to build. You might need a little rug to kind of, in their mind, to give them a visual barrier of where they need to stay with those blocks. Maybe they just need a table. If they're practicing fact fluency, they might just need one little tub with different game options that they pull off a shelf and take to a table. So maybe a certain table in your room becomes the fact fluency center when it's center time. So just think through where you're going to locate those centers so that they're going to be productive for everybody who's doing them. And then you need to think about how you're going to label the centers, right? The kids need to be able to visually see where those centers are. So are you going to put a sign up that says math center, reading center, whatever, writing center? Are you going to have center number 1, center number 2? Are you going to have the red center, the yellow center, the blue center? Think through how you want to label those centers so that visually it's easy for your students to see where they're going and what they're going to be doing while they get there, when they get there. And then you need to think about the materials. What materials will go in your center? Think through the standards that they'll need to practice in that center and what materials are going to make that possible. Every center should have kind of a baseline of materials that stay there throughout the year, and then you trade out a few things here and there to keep it engaging and to address the different skills that you might be working on in that center. Think about what kind of storage containers you need for those materials and how they're going to fit in the space that you have available in that center. Next, you need to think about when in your daily schedule are you going to do centers. Will it be first thing in the morning, the students walk in the door and choose a center so that they're occupied and learning from the very first minute? Will it be after you've taught the lesson when you're trying to do your guided reading groups? Maybe it's both. Maybe it's after lunch. Maybe it's after recess. Maybe it's later in the afternoon. Maybe it's the last thing they do during the day. Think through your schedule and think about the best time to have your center time in that schedule, and then you have to decide how long it will last. So again, this totally depends on the age of your students, right? Their attention span typically is 1 minute per year old that they are. Now that doesn't mean that in pre-K4 your centers can only last 4 minutes. However, it really shouldn't be more than 10 minutes, maybe 15 at the end of the year. Once they get up to second grade, they can last a little bit longer. They can go, 15, 20 minutes on an activity, especially if it's engaging and open-ended. So really think through how long you want those center times to last. Now, once you've come up with all of that, you have the logistics kind of ironed out, then you want to think about what order you're going to introduce your centers. Again, which one do you have enough materials of to be able to introduce to the whole class at one time? And then what do you need to do second and third and fourth until all of your materials have been, all of your centers have been introduced. So you want to kind of plan out the order in which you're going to introduce those centers in the fall to your students. And then you want to think about what your cleanup signal will be. It might be a song that you play. I've used cleanup songs before. I would just play it on my phone, and when they heard it, they knew that they were supposed to clean up. It might be a bell. It might be, I have a wooden train whistle. When you blow into it, it sounds like a train. Any kind of chime or song or bell, any kind of distinctive noise that's only used as that signal will work. You just have to teach your students what it is. So decide what you want your cleanup signal to be, and then make sure you include that whenever you're introducing your centers and teaching them what to do during those first few weeks of school. Now, working through all of those questions is going to help you create a solid plan for using centers in your classroom, and knowing exactly what you want your center time to look like is really just going to establish the framework for the whole rest of the year that you're going to plug those activities into based on what you're learning in class. You don't want to have to focus on the logistics of centers as you go through the year. You want that to be established early so then you can focus on the content of the center. You want to focus on the what, not the how, right? So that's why it's so important to really spend time going through all of this, figuring it out, planning it out before the first day of school so that you can start off strong and carry that through the rest of the year. Now, I know we've learned a lot in this class. I hope it was beneficial to you. I hope even if you've used centers before, even if you're an experienced teacher, you were able to pick up some little nuggets that were helpful to you. If you still have questions or if you need more support, once you start diving into planning your centers, or right now if you're just like, oh my gosh, I'm lost, I need help, please feel free to reach out to me, email, call, text, and I will help you however I can so that you can start your year strong and those kiddos can have a fantastic experience in your centers as they go through the year. Thank you so much for giving me some of your time, and don't forget, whenever you're done with all of the different pieces of every module, you have that 2-hour PD certificate coming. So if you have completed everything, you can expect to see that from me soon. Have a fantastic summer, and I'll see you in August. Bye.